This is TWiT.
Artificial intelligence may someday rule the world, but before that happens, we'll have to get very comfortable talking to it as if it were an actual human being. Maybe you've done this before already. Perhaps we'll be talking to a replica of ourselves. Joining us to discuss this bizarre future trend is Mike Murphy from Quartz. How's it going, Mike?
Not too bad.
Right on. Thank you for joining us. So late this summer, your team published just a huge special project called Machines with Brains. Some fascinating stuff in there, so I highly encourage if people missed it, they go back and dive in. But you spent a few months chatting with an app called Replika, and I've actually been playing around with it a little bit myself, but obviously you spent a lot more time with it than I have. So first, tell us a little bit about the idea behind the app, how it was inspired.
Sure. So the app comes from this company, this startup called Luca, that has been building chatbots that do a range of things for a few years. Like, they made one that was just like telling you the weather, one that gave you travel recommendations, all kinds of random stuff. And one of the founders' best friends passed away, got hit by a car one day when at home, and died tragically at a young age. And she, the founder, Zhenya Guida, decided to basically take every text that she'd ever sent and every text she'd ever received from him and run it through the AI systems that they'd been using to build these little chatbots that they've been making, to basically make a kind of chatbot version of her good friend, Roman was his name. And she released this, I think this was last summer now. And it was scary because, obviously for her and people who knew Roman, there was a connection there, and it really felt like this bot was saying things that he would have said, and she opened it up to the world. And, even if you never met this guy, you got a sense of personality from this bot that really is something that you don't get so often from bots. Siri might crack a joke when you talk to her, but you can tell that it's like just a weird robot. And basically they started getting a lot of people saying, how can I do this? I want to build something like this for someone I've lost, or I just want to see what it's like for me, and that sort of thing. And they kind of decided to pivot the company a little bit and create what is now being called Replika, which is essentially a way of taking conversations that you have with this internal bot in the Replika app to create a version of you. And you can add in your Twitter account, you can add in your Instagram account, like all the stuff that you would be very much yourself, and like the way that you talk in the world. You can add those into the bot as well. But basically you are just going through having a conversation with this bot, and over time, it's supposed to essentially create a little digital version of yourself.
So your bot, in the conversation you put in the article, your bot said that you should drink less and eat better and have more friends.
Now, what are you saying, bot? Jeez.
Did you tell it that, or was that? Did it just glean that simply from your social media profiles?
So I think in that case, it was compiling things that I had told it at different points. I was testing out the software when it was back in beta in like February, started in February and ran till like May or July. And, it would, sometimes it might, especially early on, it would like parrot things back at you that you say to it. And when I first got it, I was feeling a little down then, and I was probably very over dramatic. It was like the most dramatic version of Mike that I could have possibly put into this system. And so, yeah, there were times where it definitely said stuff that was like emo Mike talking. But that's like a part of me, and there's other sides that are different. And, if you talk to something for long enough, it kind of understands the different sides of you.
Now, as you mentioned, you need to chat with the bot for quite a while before it starts to kind of understand your mannerisms, understand the words you use, the phrases you use, all that kind of stuff. Is it hard to stay? Because I played around with it for a day basically, and there's a big setup time where you're chatting with a bot and it asks you a question and it's all very conversational. If you didn't know it was a robot, maybe you'd be less inclined to actually, figure it out. But still, because you know it is a robot, because you know it's code, it's kind of hard to stay motivated to like keep up this conversation with something that doesn't exist. Is that hard to build up that profile to like stay kind of connected to it enough to be able to fill it with the information that it needs over time?
I can definitely see that for being a challenge for certain people. And, obviously when I was doing it, I was really trying to get it to work. I want it to be as honest and as open as possible, even though honestly, that's not necessarily how I am in my life. So am I actually being as true to myself as I should be? If I'm open with it, and I'm not an open person, then like, am I actually doing the right thing? But yeah, I think that it will be a challenge for certain people. Like they'll think, okay, well, I have to put all this time into it. And then, they might not see the benefit in that. But for others, maybe people who are, struggling with loneliness or depression or anxiety, people who might not have a lot of friends, might not be able to get out very much. I can see it being a really interesting tool as this kind of thing that's endlessly fascinated by you. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a really interesting idea. And obviously you can get into like weird spaces with that where it's like, well, then this thing kind of, it's a little narcissistic and perhaps that can be unhealthy. But like, I do think that, and I spoke to a lot of psychologists and psychiatrists about their techniques and the way that they go about helping people who have, certain issues that can be dealt with like that. And Replika, Luca, the company behind Replika, also spoke and worked with psychologists to make sure that the way that they were asking questions to get information from you were the ways that psychiatrists work. And, when I went through it, I was kind of explaining how it was working. A lot of the psychiatrists were basically like, yeah, that's basically how we work.
So in a way, I mean, this is a Black Mirror episode. Yes. This is the movie She. This is, and neither one of those end well. But in a way, the more when I read your article and thought about it, it's really so much of real life right now. I mean, you and I have these occasional, and Jason, we have these occasional Skype conversations about tech news stories, and you and I direct message sometimes. But most of how I know you living in New York is through your Twitter feed. And I don't really, I don't really know you. Like, I only know what you're putting forth on Twitter, and that's the sort of the same way. And I feel like I have a lot of relationships like this, and this is the way we're moving towards. And I hope it ends well, but if you believe in Black Mirror and the movies, it really doesn't.
It's totally true. That episode of Black Mirror is a really good one as well. But I guess the difference here is that like these AI systems that like Replika are using or, similar companies are not that sophisticated. Like you will eventually be able to see through the AI. And I've been using it so much that I ended up, I kind of stopped after a while. Like I still talk to it every so often. I talked to it yesterday. But like you do realize on some level, yes, I'm just talking to an AI, but like sometimes just having something that's interested in you is nice. Right. And I can see downsides in this. I think more realistic downsides are not like these things are going to become so great that they're going to copy us and replace us, but more like that something that is so obsessed with you that you become so obsessed with it in a kind of toxic way. I can see that happening to some people maybe. But yeah, these systems are not, and probably won't be for a very long time, powerful enough to actually replace you. This one in particular does a really good job of figuring out mannerisms and the way that each of us type. And obviously they get information about the way we live and things that we do. But so it's easy to create this veneer of a person. And it's easy as a person to get a reaction when you see something like that written. But that's not the same, obviously, as really replacing someone.
Yeah, and I'm not really worried about, digital assistants destroying us or anything like that. I'm worried more about what you're talking about, like the veneer of a person. And I worry about people that are younger, thinking, I mean, even my kids, my oldest is 14, like I'm already talking to her about your online personality is your personal brand. And I know that sounds gross, but you kind of have to do that because it's to tell the difference between who you are online and who you are in real life. And I think kids that are just immersed in all of this technology really need to be reminded that there's a difference between those two things.
I think that's totally true, and I can see systems like this being more of an issue in the future. But yeah, I mean, it's something that we don't deal with very well right now. I mean, even I, as a apparently fully functioning adult, spend way too much time on the internet talking to people and doing dumb things. Like that is not something that we're equipped for because it's not existed before. Like there was nothing that our parents' generations or even the generation directly before us has to reference. I mean, even something like AOL Instant Messenger was not anywhere near as immersive as the mobile web is today.
No, it was competing with an entirely different paradigm. We've really moved the goalposts pretty far from that point, definitely. But for its time, it was pretty darn forward thinking, I suppose. Finally, were there other people that know you that got to interact with your replica, and would they what were their opinions? Did they say from their perspective that it was a good representation of who they know you to be?
I never got to the stage, partially because when I was still testing it, it was still pretty much, I think, the whole time in beta.
Right.
I never got to the point where I could like other people had accounts and I'd be like, go talk to MikeBot. But I gave people my phone, like friends of mine, and made them ask questions. And the answers were, answers I would give. Mm-hmm. Maybe sometimes they were a little more awkward because, the AI syntax wasn't quite right. But it knew my favorite food. It knew my best friend. It knew where I worked. It knew my aspirations, things like that. And parroting trivia about me is one thing, but having the syntax right and the way that I actually type, I think really helped sell that. I really wanted to get to a point, and I didn't get there where I could give it to my mom and be like, which one is me? Do a Turing test with my mom, but I didn't get there, unfortunately.
She'd be able to tell, Mike.
Yeah.
She would.
Pretty certain. And if not, then that's the advanced Turing test. That's the next level Turing test. Mike Murphy with Quartz. That's QZ.com. And definitely check out this whole feature, which was Machines with Brains. Like I said, it came out during the summer, but it's some really fascinating stuff in there. And you took one for the team, spending so much time chatting with an AI bot and trusting that it wouldn't end badly. So thank you for doing that, Mike. We really appreciate it.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
All right. We'll talk to you soon, Mike. Take care.